Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we bring you a breaking development that is sending shockwaves across the international stage. Reports confirm that a Russian drone has rammed into a U.S. F-35 fighter jet, marking one of the most direct and dangerous encounters between Russian and NATO forces in recent years. Now, let's understand this step by step. The F-35 is one of America's most advanced stealth aircraft, designed for dominance in the skies. For such a high-value jet to be struck, even by an unmanned drone, raises serious concerns about aerial safety, military escalation, and rules of engagement in contested airspaces. In the immediate aftermath, NATO wasted no time in signaling strength. Alliance forces carried out targeted military maneuvers near Kaliningrad, Russia's heavily militarized enclave on the Baltic Sea. Kaliningrad is not just any region. It is Russia's forward base in Europe, packed with advanced missile systems capable of reaching deep into NATO territory. By moving quickly in Kaliningrad, NATO is sending a clear message. Aggression will be met with decisive deterrence. But beyond the headlines, this confrontation teaches us something important about modern warfare. We are witnessing how drones, low-cost, expendable, and remotely operated, are changing the dynamics of global conflict. Even the most advanced jets can be harassed or damaged by unmanned systems, raising questions about the future of aerial supremacy. From an educational perspective, this crisis highlights three lessons. First, international law struggles to keep pace with emerging technologies like drones in warfare. Second, the geography of regions like Kaliningrad makes them permanent flashpoints where small incidents can spiral into global crises. And third, the balance between deterrence and escalation is becoming more fragile than ever. In conclusion, the drone strike on the U.S. F-35 and NATO's swift response in Kaliningrad are not just isolated military actions. They are a window into the evolving nature of 21st century warfare where technology, geography, and politics intersect, shaping the future of global security. Stay with us as we continue to track this developing story and its impact on world affairs. The reported incident of a Russian drone ramming into a U.S. F-35 fighter jet has quickly become one of the most talked about flashpoints in the current climate of military tensions. To understand why this event carries such weight, it is important to break down what happened, why it matters, and how it fits into the larger picture of aerial warfare and international security. According to multiple defense channels, the drone, operated by Russian forces, made direct physical contact with the American aircraft during a patrol mission. While drones are commonly used for surveillance or precision strikes, deliberately colliding with a manned fighter jet marks a dramatic escalation. This is not just a matter of equipment being damaged. It raises fundamental questions about intent, strategy, and risk tolerance on the Russian side. The F-35 itself is at the center of this incident, and for good reason. As one of the most technologically advanced fighters in the world, the F-35 represents not only U.S. air power but also NATO's collective defense capabilities. It is designed with stealth technology, advanced sensors, and precision strikeability, making it an invaluable asset in any theater of operations. When such an aircraft is struck, even if the damage is not catastrophic, the symbolism of the attack resonates far beyond the immediate encounter. It suggests that Russia is willing to use unconventional tactics, including expendable drones, to challenge high-value NATO assets. In military terms, this transforms the drone from a surveillance tool into a weapon of harassment and provocation. From an educational standpoint, it is important to note how drones function in this environment. Unlike traditional aircraft, drones are unmanned, relatively inexpensive, and can be deployed in large numbers. Losing one does not carry the same political or human cost as losing a fighter jet with a pilot on board. This asymmetry creates a new kind of battlefield dynamic where one side can take high-risk actions without fearing the same level of retaliation. By deliberately ramming a drone into a manned jet, Russia may be testing NATO's threshold for response, probing how far it can push without sparking a full-scale escalation. Another layer to this incident involved the rules of engagement. In international airspace, encounters between military aircraft are usually governed by unwritten codes of conduct designed to prevent accidents and escalation. These range from maintaining safe distances to avoiding aggressive maneuvers. By sending a drone to collide with an American F-35, Russia is essentially disregarding these conventions. That act, whether premeditated or opportunistic, undermines the fragile trust that keeps such encounters from spiraling out of control. This kind of behavior erodes stability in contested zones, making future incidents more likely and more dangerous. The strategic timing of the incident also cannot be ignored. Both Russia and NATO are engaged in heightened military exercises and patrols in Eastern Europe, particularly around the Baltic region. These operations are designed to project power and reassure allies, but they also increase the chances of direct contact. The drone collision could be interpreted as Russia's attempt to send a message not just to the United States, but to NATO as a whole, that it is willing to employ unpredictable tactics in its defense of strategic regions such as Kaliningrad. For the United States and NATO, the challenge lies in interpreting this incident correctly. Was it a calculated provocation, a rogue action by local commanders, or a technical mishap that spiraled out of control? Each possibility carries different implications for how NATO should respond. A calculated provocation would suggest a deliberate strategy by Moscow to escalate pressure, while an accident would still highlight the risks of crowded and contested airspace. In either case, the outcome is the same, a high-profile incident that raises tensions and forces policymakers to consider next steps carefully. Ultimately, this collision represents more than a single dramatic encounter between a drone and a fighter jet. It is a microcosm of modern aerial conflict, where old assumptions about safety and predictability no longer hold. Drones, once seen as supplementary tools, are now being used in aggressive and unconventional ways. The F-35, despite its cutting-edge defenses, is not immune to low-tech threats when adversaries are willing to use their equipment recklessly. The lesson here is sobering. In today's world, even the most advanced technology cannot fully shield nations from dangers of escalation driven by human intent and political calculation. The immediate aftermath of the drone strike on the U.S. F-35 sent ripples of urgency across NATO command centers. In moments like these, what happens after the incident is often just as important as the event itself. Within hours of the collision, NATO military channels were activated, and intelligence sharing mechanisms began compiling data to confirm the sequence of events. From a defense perspective, the question was not only about assessing the extent of damage to the American aircraft, but also about signaling unity and readiness to respond. Every second mattered because in military strategy, hesitation can be interpreted as weakness, and weakness can invite further aggression. NATO's first reaction was a diplomatic one, with statements from Washington, London, and Brussels condemning the act as reckless and destabilizing. However, diplomacy alone rarely suffices in such high-stakes scenarios. Behind the public statements, military leaders coordinated a series of measured responses designed to reinforce deterrence without tipping into uncontrolled escalation. This is where Kaliningrad came into sharp focus. NATO forces began conducting targeted exercises and air patrols in and around the Baltic region, deliberately positioning themselves to demonstrate both presence and resolve. Kaliningrad, as Russia's heavily fortified outpost in Europe, symbolized the balance of power. By directing its response there, NATO ensured that its message could not be misunderstood. These maneuvers were not random. They were carefully calibrated actions meant to showcase NATO's readiness while avoiding the appearance of outright provocation. Fighter jets were scrambled to patrol key air corridors, naval vessels were repositioned in the Baltic Sea, and ground forces in Poland and Lithuania were placed on higher alert. Each move had symbolic and practical significance. Symbolically, it reassured NATO allies closest to Russia that they would not be left vulnerable. Practically, it made clear to Moscow that NATO's defensive lines were strong, cohesive, and responsive. In educational terms, this illustrates the concept of escalation management, a principle central to modern military strategy. When a hostile act occurs, such as the ramming of a drone into a manned jet, the opposing side must choose a response that balances deterrence with restraint. Too weak a response risks emboldening the aggressor, while too strong a response risks uncontrolled conflict. NATO's actions after the incident highlight how alliances use signaling through military posture, exercises, and statements to communicate boundaries. It is not only about punishing the provocation, but also about shaping the adversary's future behavior. Another aspect of the aftermath was the role of collective decision-making within NATO. Unlike a single nation acting alone, NATO operates on the principle of consensus. That means each response requires agreement among its members. The swiftness with which NATO reacted underscored the alliance's ability to move past bureaucracy when its credibility is at stake. The unity shown in the hours and days after the incident was as important as the military moves themselves. To Russia, this signaled that dividing NATO through pressure tactics would be far more difficult than anticipated. The presence of Kaliningrad in this context adds yet another layer of complexity. Kaliningrad is not simply a Russian territory, it is a heavily militarized zone equipped with advanced missile systems, radar installations, and fortified defenses. By responding near Kaliningrad, NATO knowingly chose to address Russia at one of its strongest positions. This was not an accident but a deliberate move. From an educational perspective, this teaches us about strategic geography. Certain regions in global politics act as pressure points where military and political symbolism converge. Kaliningrad is one such point, making it the perfect location for NATO to demonstrate resolve without directly entering Russian mainland territory. The immediate aftermath also involved a surge of behind-the-scenes communication. Hotlines between NATO and Russian military officials were likely tested to reduce the chance of miscalculation. Such communication channels are not signs of weakness, but of prudence, as both sides understand the danger of unplanned escalation. These interactions, though not publicized, are essential for preventing small sparks from turning into uncontrollable fires. Ultimately, NATO's response to the drone strike on the F-35 can be seen as a masterclass in crisis management. It balanced visible military readiness with diplomatic pressure, it leveraged geography to send strategic signals, and it preserved alliance unity at a moment when division would have been most costly. The educational takeaway is clear. In international conflicts, it is not only the incident itself that defines the course of events, but also the quality, speed, and coherence of the response. NATO demonstrated that it could absorb a provocation, respond decisively, and reinforce stability without falling into the trap of uncontrolled escalation. When examining the strategic significance of Kaliningrad in the aftermath of the drone strike incident, it becomes clear why this small enclave carries such weight in global security discussions. Kaliningrad is geographically unique. It is a Russian territory, yet it is separated from the rest of Russia by Poland and Lithuania, both of which are NATO members. This isolation gives Kaliningrad a special role in Moscow's military planning and NATO's defensive strategy. In simple terms, it is an outpost of Russia nestled in the heart of NATO's eastern flank, a fact that makes it both a shield and a sword in the balance of European security. From a military perspective, Kaliningrad is often described as one of the most heavily fortified regions in Europe. The Russian military has stationed advanced air defense systems there, including the S-400 missile batteries, which can track and potentially target aircraft deep inside NATO territory. Alongside these are Iskander missile systems capable of striking targets as far away as Berlin. This dense concentration of weaponry essentially turns Kaliningrad into a launch pad and deterrent zone. Any NATO aircraft or naval vessel operating in the Baltic Sea must take into account the radar coverage and missile range extending from this enclave. In the context of the F-35 incident, NATO's decision to focus its response near Kaliningrad was not a coincidence. It was a deliberate choice to confront Russia in the one place where both sides understand the stakes most clearly. Beyond its military hardware, Kaliningrad also holds symbolic importance. It represents the forward line of Russia's influence in Europe. While Moscow often frames it as a defensive bastion protecting its western approaches, NATO views it as a wedge placed in the middle of Allied territory, a constant reminder of Russia's reach and presence. This duality makes Kaliningrad a hotspot for both reassurance and intimidation. For the Baltic state, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, the proximity of Kaliningrad is a permanent security concern. For Poland, it is a reminder that Russian forces sit just across the border, with it striking distance of major population centers. Thus, when NATO responds in Kaliningrad, it is not only addressing Russia but also demonstrating solidarity with its most vulnerable allies. Educationally, Kaliningrad illustrates the concept of strategic geography. Certain locations on the map gain disproportionate importance because of where they are situated. Control or influence over these points can shift the balance of power in entire regions. For Russia, Kaliningrad is indispensable because it ensures access to the Baltic Sea and projects military strength far beyond its borders. For NATO, the enclave is a test of how to operate in contested zones without allowing geography to become a permanent disadvantage. The lessons of Kaliningrad extend beyond Europe, showing how small territories in key regions can anchor global strategies and define how alliances posture themselves. Another dimension of Kaliningrad's significance lies in the question of escalation. Because the enclave is so heavily armed and so close to NATO territory, any confrontation there risks immediate escalation. A miscalculation could spiral into a direct clash between NATO and Russian forces, bypassing the slower political build-up that usually precedes conflict. This is why NATO's moves around Kaliningrad after the drone strike were carefully choreographed. The alliance needed to show presence and resolve without crossing lines that could trigger an uncontrollable response from Moscow. In this sense, Kaliningrad acts like a pressure cooker, always under tension, with the potential to erupt if either side misjudges the other's intentions. Finally, Kaliningrad carries economic and logistical importance as well. It is home to the Russian Baltic Fleet, giving Moscow a naval foothold in northern Europe. It also sits along vital trade and energy routes, linking maritime flows between Russia and Europe. By holding Kaliningrad, Russia secures a constant reminder to NATO that any attempt to isolate Moscow in the Baltic would be incomplete without dealing with this enclave. For NATO, this means that long-term defense planning cannot ignore Kaliningrad, no matter what the broader political climate may be. In the end, the strategic significance of Kaliningrad explains why NATO chose to respond there after the drone collision with the F-35. It is not just a regional issue. It is a global signal. Actions taken in Kaliningrad reverberate across Europe and into the wider world. The enclave is a case study in how geography, military power, and symbolism intersect, shaping the dynamics of confrontation between great powers. For students of international relations and military affairs, Kaliningrad is a textbook example of how a single location can embody the tensions of an entire era. The incident of a Russian drone ramming into a U.S. F-35 and the subsequent NATO response in Kaliningrad provides an opportunity to explore broader educational insights about global security, the evolution of air warfare, and the challenges facing international law. This event is not simply a military clash, but a moment that reveals how modern conflicts are reshaping long-standing assumptions about how nations interact in contested environments. It underscores that today's security concerns extend far beyond immediate battles. They encompass technology, law, strategy, and the fragile balance between deterrence and escalation. One of the clearest lessons lies in the transformation of air warfare. For decades, aerial combat was dominated by manned fighter jets, advanced bombers, and large-scale air campaigns. The emergence of drones has completely altered this landscape. Unmanned aerial vehicles are relatively inexpensive, versatile, and expendable. They can surveil, harass, or attack without putting pilots at risk. In this context, drones give smaller nations or even non-state actors the ability to challenge advanced aircraft like the F-35, not through traditional dogfights, but through asymmetric tactics. The ramming incident exemplifies this shift. It shows that even the most technologically superior systems are vulnerable to low-cost disruptions when adversaries are willing to sacrifice hardware to make a strategic point. This lesson forces military planners to reconsider what air superiority means in the 21st century. Another educational insight is the role of escalation dynamics. In international security, small incidents can quickly grow into major confrontations. A drone striking a fighter jet might seem like a limited act, but when the jet represents not only U.S. power but also NATO's credibility, the consequences magnify. This is a reminder that modern security is not just about weapons and numbers, but about perception and signaling. Nations must weigh their responses carefully because the line between deterrence and provocation is thin. In this case, NATO's decision to respond with maneuvers in Kaliningrad demonstrates an effort to restore balance without unleashing a wider war. The educational takeaway is that managing escalation is as much about communication and restraint as it is about military strength. International law faces unique challenges in this environment. Traditional laws of armed conflict were written in an era before drones, cyber warfare, or autonomous systems. There are no universally agreed upon rules about whether ramming a drone into a manned aircraft constitutes an act of war, an accident, or a provocation short of conflict. This legal ambiguity creates space for countries to test boundaries, sometimes deliberately exploiting the grey areas. The incident highlights the urgent need for updated international agreements that define the rights and responsibilities of nations when drones and advanced aircraft share contested skies. For students of law and diplomacy, this case provides a clear example of how technological innovation outpaces legal frameworks, forcing the world to catch up. On a broader level, the event also reveals how geography and politics intersect with technology. Kaliningrad's role in NATO's response demonstrates that certain regions act as permanent flashpoints where small sparks can ignite larger fires. Educational insight here is that global security is not evenly distributed. Instead, it clusters around pressure points where geography, history, and military power converge. Understanding these hotspots is essential for predicting where the next crisis might emerge. Finally, this incident served as a reminder of the fragility of peace in an interconnected world. While the Cold War era was defined by clear rules and mutual recognition of red lines, today's conflicts are shaped by unconventional tactics, rapid technological change, and shifting political calculations. The ramming of a drone into a fifth-generation fighter jet might appear reckless, but it is also a symptom of a deeper problem, the erosion of predictability in international relations. The lesson for global citizens is that security cannot be taken for granted. Stability requires constant negotiation, adaptation, and investment in systems that reduce the risk of accidental or intentional escalation. In sum, the drone collision and NATO's response provide an educational window into the future of conflict. They show how air warfare is evolving, how escalation must be managed, how international law struggles to remain relevant, and how geography continues to shape global politics. For analysts, policymakers, and students alike, the key insight is that the tools of war may change, but the underlying need for balance, restraint, and clarity remains as urgent as ever.